Hey guys, we've got an action-packed episode today. We've got the chopping block control arm set. We've got some lowering shocks, the React shock relocator, the 90-degree bulkhead fittings. We're going to run some airline and get this truck on the ground, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Simple C10. We're hopping back on the Lucky build. On the last episode, I talked a lot about the VelaWorks front do-it-yourself slam kit, and part of that slam kit were these drop pockets. Drop pockets are one option that you have to get that bag mounted to the lower control arm to lay your truck out all the way. The other option is chopping block control arms. So these have been narrowed and forward 1 inch, giving us more steering clearance. We're going to install these on the front of Lucky, and I'm going to tell you the difference between those and the lower control arm pockets. After we install the chopping block control arms, we're going to move over and install the React shock relocator kit on the side of the frame. These are designed for this style of shock that has a stud on the top. And once we install those, we're going to move on to the 90-degree bulkhead fittings and get the air line installed on the front of this truck. Another great upgrade that you can do whenever you're working on the control arms is to drill your holes for your U-bolts a little bit larger and install these beefed up lower control arm U-bolts. For most people, when you're deciding between the VelaWorks drop pockets and the control arm set, budget is going to come to mind. The VelaWorks front do-it-yourself slam kit is about $260 right now, compared to these are going to be $1,045. Now that's a huge difference, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to try these out and see what the main difference is. One of the perks to control arms is just the ease of installation. You don't have to cut anything or weld anything. You just bolt these right in and you're ready to install your bag. That's one of the main reasons I'm installing these on Lucky. I'm ready to get the front of this truck done and get it on the ground. So I want to install these, but also it's going to help the C10 community out because I'm going to give my honest feedback. Was it really worth the money to buy these control arms, or should I have just went with the VelaWorks drop pockets? Hey, if these control arms are out of your budget, or you just prefer to go with the drop pockets, then I've got multiple videos step by step how to install these drop pockets on your lower control arms. I'll have those linked here and in the description. So if you're looking to purchase these control arms, I've got these available on my website, simpleC10.co. Couple options that you get here. You can get the factory replacement style, and that's going to allow you to not have to cup your lowers. The bag's going to mount directly to the lower control arm. Or you can get the forward and narrowed 1 inch. So what that does is it narrows your control arm 1 inch, and then it also moves it forward 1 inch. So it gets it away from the firewall and gets it away from the outside fender, and that's going to give you more steering clearance. Lower control arms have a little groove in them, and that's going to line up with the little pin that's right here. So I'm going to tighten them down just enough where I still can move it around, and I'll get it lined up, and I'll twist up the control arm and then tighten it down with everything aligned. The lower control arm is installed in, bolted right into the bag. One of the things I see immediately is when I push up on this, I know that this spindle is going way further than it normally would up in here before there's any hitting or anything like that. I would say it'd probably go right there, which leaves a lot of flexibility in the bag, which is good. This is level with the bottom of my frame, so I'm really excited to see how much lower the truck will go with these, if at all any. Normally stock control arms will touch the ground before the cross member. I still think the U-bolts are a little bit lower, but I'm excited to see if it'll actually drop the truck lower. If it does, then that's a huge win. Check those out. That turned out awesome. These look great. Everything bolted in nicely. Frame looks good. Next, we're going to install the upper control arm and then clean up our disc brakes and drop spindles and reinstall those on. One thing I see with the arm, when you go to install it, the bottom of it touches right here, so we're going to have to shim this out just a little bit further. This didn't have a lot of shims on it whenever I took it off. Usually it has a lot more. So I'm going to try to use that and shim accordingly to get clearance. Alright, so just make sure that you shim these enough that this bar will clear this little hump. Right here is super close, so I've got just a couple shims here and a shim there. Very close to where it was what I took off, but just one extra shim on both sides to stick it out just a little bit more. We're going to install our upper ball joints now. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. Some people mount this under. I've seen some people do that. Some of the manufacturers call for that. On the chopping block, they came from the factory with them mounted up top. Okay, now it's time to install the drop spindle on here. We're going to line it up, set it on the ball joints, and then tighten everything up. We've got the chopping block control arms installed, and man, do these things look awesome. Everything all blacked out, looks great. So the next step is installing our drop shocks. So this is something I've never done before. These are the React shock relocators, and they're built for this style of shock, and I've never used this style before. Usually I'll use a 3-inch drop shock that mounts into the factory location, and it works great. But again, I wanted to try something different so I could give you guys feedback on what works, what doesn't work, what do we need to try, is the upgrade worth it. But here is what we're going to do next. So these are really easy to install. All we're going to do is align this little pin with the factory hole from the shock. I'll show you that in just a second. And then we're going to make this bottom part of the bracket parallel with the bottom of the frame, and that is going to allow the shock to go through there and mount into the bottom of the control arm. A shock like this is going to allow a lot more travel. So at low ride heights, it's going to be sitting about where that shock is right now instead of having a fully compressed shock. This will give you more travel in the middle of a shock. After we install the shock on the frame, then we will start to drill our holes for our 90-degree bulkhead fittings and run our air line to the front. Again, it lines up with the factory shock hole, and then you just want to get this angle directly down at the same angle as the shock would be. So to align this, I know that my shock is going to go out about a 1/2 inch here because I have a spacer, and then it's going to run straight up and down right there. So for the bottom on the inside, you'll want to get a spacer to keep the rubber away from the actual control arm to give it a little bit of space. Go ahead and slide the bolt in, slide the spacer in. And this is where you need a little manpower. Get that bolt in there, just like that. See how the bag is not deflated all the way? That will help with the ride quality too. Hey, it's day 2 of putting the front air ride onto Lucky. So we've got the control arms on, we've got the shock relocators and the new shocks. Now it is time to run our airline. There's a lot of different ways to run your airline, but what I like to do is drill a hole in the side of the spring pocket, run the airline through the frame with a grommet, and then into one of these 90-degree bulkhead fittings. I'll go around the shock, that way I keep the airline away from the exhaust, and then I'll drill a hole and install these. So here's how I run my airline in the front. From the driver's side, I will plug in the line and run it through the cross member all the way over here. I'm going to drill a hole right here in just a second and put a rubber grommet. I'll have the line from the driver's side and the line coming from this bag come out the hole here and loop around the outside of the shock and then into these 2 holes here that I'm going to use the 90-degree bulkhead fitting. So I'll drill the hole out, you'll see these sticking out the frame, and then the line will loop around the shock and then to the side of the frame, and then it will plug in here, and then as you see on the back side there's a 90. That 90 the airline will plug into and then go all the way back to the airlift 3-piece system. I used to run my airline through the frame and then all the way down here, it clamped on the side of the frame. The reason I don't do that anymore is because when we're running the exhaust out the side of the frame right here, it gets that line very close to the exhaust. So I started drilling 2 holes for the bulkhead fittings up here and looping the line around the shock way up here to keep it away from the exhaust. It's worked really well. It's easy if you need to do maintenance as well. There's a push fitting right here that you can pull the line out of and do any kind of work that you need on the front of the truck. So next I'll go ahead and drill that hole, put the rubber grommet in there, begin to run my airline to both sides of the truck, and then I'll loop the line and see where a good spot to drill those holes are. If you weren't running the exhaust out the side of the frame right here, one thing that I thought of is drilling the hole further back and then running the lines right here into a bulkhead fitting, or just right here up through the frame all the way back. So I had to run to the parts store and get me a new unibit. This is a Milwaukee brand. $58 for this thing, man. These are not cheap, but it's hard to do intense cutting without them. I'm going to try to cut a big enough hole to fit this grommet in there to fit both of our air lines through there. Spray it with a little paint so this doesn't rust in here. I just use some of this Pour 15. It matches the sweet patina sheen, and I just sprayed the holes where I drilled to make sure those don't rust and that it matches the rest of my frame. The bulkhead 90s are going to go through the back of the frame and stick out this way. So what happens now is this air line is going to stick through here and it's going to plug directly into the fittings here. It's going to loop around the shock right there and plug into the side of the frame. That gives us enough clearance for the exhaust and to clear the shock. Now that we have the hole drilled in the frame, we're going to take our grommet and we're going to slide it into the hole. So there's a trick to these grommets. I like to go ahead and get it started in the hole and then take a screwdriver and put it in the hole and kind of put pressure around the edges to get it to set into the metal. We've got the hole drilled here in the grommet. We've got the two bulkhead fittings. Now it's time that we run our air line. Remember, we're going to run it from the driver's side through the cross member to the passenger side and then out that hole where the grommet is and then all the way into the bulkhead fitting. It's going to be hard to see, but I'm going to run my air line through the cross member into the driver's side and then I'll cut it to length on the passenger side. Something I like to do before I run my air line through the frame is take a piece of tape and put it over the end of the line just like that. That way you're not getting any trash or dirt or rust or anything like that in your hose. Again, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got the line right here. I'm going over the lower control arm and then through the cross member. It's not that long of a journey. You can actually use your other hand and reach it here on the other side to make sure you've made it all the way. Once you've got it enough on one side to grab it with your hand, there we go. As you can see, it's right here on this side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a fresh cut on this and then plug it into the bag fitting that's actually right above here on the bag. Here's the airline that we ran from the other side. What I'm going to do is use my airline cutters and cut a fresh, nice cut and then plug it into the bag fitting that's right on top of the cross member right here. You can reach it with your hand. So we're just going to cut the line, then fill up in there, get the 90-degree fitting in the right position, push it in all the way, and then pull on it really hard so it sets in. Then we'll go over to the passenger side, run it through the grommet into the bulkhead. Before we do the driver's side hose through the grommet, let's go ahead and do the passenger side because it's going to plug directly into the bag right here. So we want as much room as we can get to be able to angle it, to plug it in, to pull it, and then run it here. So we're going to do that next. Cut enough length of line that's going to plug into this bag and go to the bulkhead fitting, and then we'll plug that in and do that next. We're going to take our line here, it's still on the roll, and we're just going to put it through the grommet and then reach on the back side to plug it in to the air fitting. And remember, anytime we're plugging a line in, go ahead and make a fresh cut right here, and that way when you plug it in, everything is good to go. I like to make sure there's no residue or anything on the line. I've got the line lined up with the 90-degree push fitting. I'm pushing it in right now. Push it in until you feel it kind of lock in. Once you feel it lock in, I like to go in and pull it a little bit. You'll notice on the push fitting there's a little piece on the outside that can go in and out. What you want to do is push in the line and it'll go in, then pull it enough where it pops it out. Put your fingernail or just hold it out a little bit and push it one more time in with it pressed out and then tug on it. I don't know if that made sense, but that's the best way that I can explain it. Now I'm just going to kind of twist this line around to where it's going to plug in, and I'm going to cut this one just a little bit long as well, and then I'm going to run that other line in here, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. Before I run the line from the driver's side over, I'm just going to put a piece of tape right here on this line. That's going to tell me that's the passenger side line. And then when I run them both through and they're both sticking out of here, I'll know what line goes to what. On the driver's side line over, we're just going to reach through the cross member again and try to get that line up here into the grommet. Depending on your size of grommet, it's going to be a tight fit here. So what you'll want to do is just make sure as you're pulling this line through, because it will be tight, just make sure that it's not pulling your grommet out. So just do it slowly. Keep your finger on the grommet. Next, we're going to plug these air lines into the bulkhead fitting. And what we want to make sure of is there's enough line that's coming out and going directly into the fitting without having it at an angle where it's not sealing properly. What I like to do is just take the line like this, and I'm going to go ahead and push it all the way in just to see where I'm at to start with. So that looks actually really good right there where it's at a straight line and then it curves just enough to go into the grommet. I think I could go just a little bit shorter with it, but again, we don't want to go too much. Cutting it too short is the biggest issue here. So when I'm saying I will cut it a little bit shorter, we're talking about like this much, not much at all, because we can always take more off, but we can't extend it any. So I'm going to take this, take it, I'm going to push it all the way in there. I'm going to pull it to lock it in, and that's where I want to be, where it's still straight into the fitting. You'll know if it's at enough of an angle. This little black piece of the fitting is going to be bent over, but this is a straight fit. I like the clearance that I have here around the shock. So what I'm going to do is try to match the same angle with the other piece and try to keep these uniform like this. Another tip to make sure you can push this line in and out without it locking in, you can push in on the little black thing right here. Just push in when you enter the airline, and then that will allow you to pull it right back out without biting on it. That way you can check your length. I can tell it's still a little long. Let's take a little bit more off. It's a little bit at a time here. It's getting there. I think that's where I want to be. Any shorter is going to pull on this fitting more, and I don't want that to happen. I want it to be straight as I can, and I can always put a little clamp. I might put a little zip tie or something around this line right here to make it nice and even. So now, the way I like to plug these in, as you saw, this left one, that's like the driver's side. The right one is the passenger side if you're looking at it. So that's how I'm going to remember whenever I go to plug that line in to the back to run to my airlift 3-piece system. And that's it. That's how I run my airline on the front of these trucks. You can see the clearance here. Plenty of clearance. This has given us plenty of clearance to run our exhaust through here without it being too close to the airline. It's clean. If we ever have any issues with the front air ride, we can pull these push fittings and replace the line or whatever we need to do. I decided to go ahead and buy some new rotors. Everything under this truck is looking brand new, so I didn't want to put some old surface rusted rotors on there. I tried to clean up my old set, but I couldn't really get them as clean as I wanted. So I went out and bought a pair of these. I'm going to use my old bearings and everything because they're basically brand new. I'm going to pack them and put them in here. So here's some of the things that I try to just clean up and save money on. All the front steering shafts and the tie rods. If you don't need new tie rods, just clean them up. These tie rods are not that old, so I just want to sand them down, paint them, leave them exactly how they are, and reinstall all this stuff on the front of the truck. Here's a before. You can tell just a ton of crud built up. I'm just going to clean them up, paint them with some satin black, install them back on the truck with some new hardware. Brand spanking new. Francis. Alright. Uh-oh. Oopsie. Check out how nice this stuff looks after just a fresh coat of paint on there. Looks great. I'm ready to install this. I got some new hardware we're going to put on there. But while I was at Home Depot, they had a sale on this bad boy right here. If you bought the 1/2-inch impact, you got 2 of these batteries for free. So these batteries are usually $279. I paid $250 for the impact and got 2 batteries. I've got a large impact, but this one is much easier to get into tight spaces. So excited about that. I'm becoming a Milwaukee fanboy. Guys, I'll say it a million times, it's always the small detail stuff. New hardware, painting the old parts that you have to make them look new. That's what's going to set your ride apart from all of them. So I have a mixture of old and new stuff on this build. The drop spindles, the brake calipers, the brakes, everything besides the rotors were used and on this truck already. So I just painted those up, made them look nice, and bought some new rotors because you will see the rotors whenever I put the chrome wheels on there. We just painted up the old frame. Use what you can, make it look good, put new hardware and everything, and it's going to look awesome. Check out the parts that I painted. Just ground them down, sprayed them with brake cleaner, and then painted them with some Krylon satin black. Looks great. Let's get them on there, get these wheels on. I went to install these tie rods on here. As you can see, I got some messed up threads. Tried to rethread it with the nut, but that wasn't working. So I went out and bought this kit. I hopped on the old Amazon and found this 49-piece master thread chaser set. And this comes with the coarse dies, the fine taps, the metric taps, the coarse taps, the rethread files, and the metric rethread files, which I may be using today. But it has a ton of stuff, and I like that it has kind of what's in the box labeled here as well, so that's a good thing. Let's open this thing up and see what it looks like. This is not a paid advertisement. I just wanted to show you guys. First of all, I can tell you the nuts, the way they sit in these little pockets, are trash. They're not clicked in very well, so these are always going to pop out on you. I hate when tool sets don't have the right count. See, look at that. Goes everywhere. Not a good start, SETI. Not a good start. Overall, it does look nice, though. The little pictures of everything, where it goes, the files, all that's really cool. Of course, I like the red and black. It matches all the stuff that I have here. All right, it looks good. Now let's see if it actually works. At first, I couldn't do it by hand. I just kind of got it started on there. The tie rod started to spin, so I just got a vice grip and just kind of clamped it on there very lightly so it wouldn't spin. And now I've ran it down there once, and I can unscrew it with my hand. Oh yeah, I can almost do it with my hand, just a little bit of pressure. Perfect. That nut wouldn't even get started yesterday when I tried. So that's great. That's going to work well. So far so good, SETI. This one you can see pretty boogered up there on the end. Oh, that went on there like butter. Let's go. This one has been smacked with a hammer at one time. You can see that's real messed up right there. So hopefully this will start. Let's go, SETI. Ball joint spinning a little. Boom. All right. Hey guys, thanks again so much for watching the video. I want to encourage you, don't let bagging the front of one of these intimidate you or anything. It's super simple. If you've got all the parts waiting on you, you can watch a couple of my videos and have a weekend project where you can install air ride on the front of your truck. So check out the website, order everything that you need, and bag the front of your truck, and let's make progress together and get these trucks on the road. Thank you guys again for watching. All your support, your comments really encourages me to continue to make these videos. I'm having a lot of fun on this Lucky build. I love the feedback that I'm getting so far, and man, it's coming together. I'm so excited to see what it looks like when it's finally on the ground. So stay tuned for that. Have a good day. See you later.